And unfortunately in Indonesia, with there's just so many disasters here all the time, it's a bit kind of old news. When something happens here, it's not that interesting to people. It doesn't really mean much anymore. Oh, I've heard that before. Is that disaster or that disaster? Like we have 5+ on the Richter scale earthquakes every week or so at this point. We have some of the most disaster prone areas in the world by far. With this particular disaster, I think it wasn't a very well-known disaster. I have spoken to many people since then, and talked about the work that we're doing up in Padang at the moment. They're like, "What? Why are you working in Padang? What happened?" You know what I mean? Like even up till now, they don't even know that more than 1,000 people died, more than 200,000 buildings came down. I mean, it was a major disaster that happened up there, which got pretty close to zero media coverage.
Pas pagi itu saya ke sekolahan yang ketimbun ini, ya, yang lokasinya dipindah ke sini. Saya kebetulan penjaga sekolahnya. Pagi itu saya bersihin pekarangan sekolah. Selesai jam 11 saya pindah ke rumah. Terus sampai jam 3 saya tidur itu, istirahat. Jam 4 saya dibangun anak saya. Suruh ke warung gitu, ke kedai ke warung. Pas jam 5 saya mau balik ke rumah, gempa terjadi. Itu jarak saya antara rumah dengan saya itu sekitar 100 meter. Itu gempa terjadi langsung hitungan detik sama longsor. Gak sempat nyelamatin anak saya. Anak saya 2, istri saya 1, timbun. Meninggal. Ya. Terus yang dekat sekolahan ini saudara saya 2 buah rumah juga ketimbun. Korban 7 orang. Kebetulan saya sendiri yang selamat, yang di warung itu. Terus sampai sekarang kendalanya saya di sini, kadang-kadang saya berpikir pengen pindah dari sini, mau kemana lagi belum tahu gitu. Masalah pekerjaan saya di sekolah nggak dipakai lagi. Kalau ibarat pepatah Minang itu sudah jatuh ketimpa tangga. Rumah saya habis, kerjaan saya di sekolah nggak dipakai lagi. Saya udah nggak dipakai lagi di sekolah ini. Itu nasib saya terkatung-katung. Mau pindah ke mana belum tahu.
Dampak gempa terhadap terutama sekali pada areal persawahan, infrastruktur, sarana irigasi, dan rumah-rumah penduduk ini sangat sangat fatal sekali. Nah, di samping itu dengan adanya kerusakan sarana rumah, otomatis sumber kehidupan sudah susah. Untuk memperbaiki rumah sudah sangat susah sekali, dengan sumber ekonomi yang sudah tidak boleh dikatakan tidak menghasilkan. Nah, inilah dampak-dampaknya terutama sekali tentang kehidupan masyarakat.
The three basic stages of disaster management are the stage before a disaster happens, so sometimes called preparedness, also sometimes called mitigation, which is like reducing the chance of that disaster happening, what can be done, risk reduction, these sort of things. And then there's the actual time of response when the disaster occurs. There's the immediate moments after it happens, how the community responds to that moment. And then following that, there's a stage usually of humanitarian aid and assistance when people can't fulfill like their basic human needs like food and shelter and medicine and that sort of thing. And then there's a stage called recovery and rehabilitation. So that's when you're looking at putting people's environments, homes, livelihoods, economies, schools, etc. back together, where you hope that at that point, once that process is finished, that community is ready to sustain itself properly on an ongoing basis. What you see in disaster zones all over the world, it's not by any means unique to Indonesia, is that people with a lot of resource, a lot of money, a lot of very good intentions who really want to help will come in from other countries or other areas, with all the best intentions of, oh, we're going to help rebuild your schools, we're going to help rebuild your livelihoods, so on and so forth, but they don't really speak the language, they don't really understand the intricacies of the local economy or, how it functions. They don't know that something like, for example, correct, culturally appropriate clothing is way more important than Panadol or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So every culture has its own standards and its own belief and feelings, real feelings that, this is the most important thing. And there's often a lack of dialogue between the people who are coming to help and the people who are the recipients of that help, or the beneficiaries, they're called, for these programs. So again, if communities can be a lot more involved in the process of designing their own recovery and being clear about what it is that's prior to them, we found that, this like really increases efficiency, like you don't waste nearly as much money on the ground, and speeds up the process, and also increases accountability, because it's hard to monitor something you don't really understand. Yeah, so if you don't really know what's needed or how the process works or so on and so forth, you have these assumptions about what you think is right, and that's not right, and meanwhile the community's going, yeah, it's way right, that's exactly what we need.
Yang saya lihat bahwa setelah bencana 30 September gempa di Sumatera Barat, kalau organisasi internasional langsung memberikan bantuan, akan banyak hambatan, ya, handicap, seperti ada persoalan budaya, bahasa, ya kan. Dan ini tidak mudah. Ini pendekatan untuk shelter di Sumatera Barat kemarin ini dirasakan oleh organisasi internasional. Banyak problem, banyak masalah mereka lakukan ketika itu, mereka lakukan langsung sendiri di lapangan. Banyak yang tidak dapat dananya diserap oleh kegiatan tersebut. Ada juga penolakan dari masyarakat, misalnya ada kecurigaan, ada isu-isu macam-macam, ada agama, ada macam-macam gitu. Nah, ini menurut saya akan mengurangi apabila bekerja sama dengan LSM lokal, karena LSM lokal mungkin saya kira akan mengerti dengan kultur budaya setempat, ada persoalan religius, agama, strategi untuk approach kepada komunitas, kan, bahasa dan sebagainya. Ini akan membantu. Dan tidak perlu sumber daya internasional itu untuk merekrut translator, ada penunjuk jalan, ada macam-macam, terlalu banyak uang yang harus dihabiskan di situ. Jadi saya kira akan lebih baik berpartner dengan LSM lokal, bisa bekerja bersama, atau mungkin memberikan dana dalam sistem monitoring dari LSM internasional kepada LSM lokal.
Justru disitulah sisi strategisnya kenapa sebetulnya lokal NGO banyak berperan dalam membantu masyarakat korban. Karena misalnya ketika international NGO datang, mereka juga memberikan bantuan, tapi masih dengan cara meraba kira-kira masyarakat ini perlu dibantu, masyarakat ini bisa dibantu. Tapi ketika kita mempercayakan atau misalnya mendorong lokal NGO melakukan program di lapangan, mereka tahu pasti karakter masyarakat ini seperti apa, kemudian bagaimana pendekatan yang baik dilakukan kepada masyarakat itu, sehingga program yang disusun strateginya menjadi pas dan itu bisa diharapkan keberlanjutannya. Karena juga satu hal yang paling penting juga, lokal NGO dia selalu ada di sini. International NGO mereka datang memberikan bantuan, setelah selesai programnya mereka pergi. Tapi bagaimana dengan keberlanjutan?
You know, our major focus for emergency response is working with local NGOs to help people that are probably not going to get help otherwise. So that'll be communities in areas that are quite remote and hard to get to, or smaller communities that don't kind of fit the mandate that the larger organizations need. You tend to find in disaster zones that the internationals have sometimes quite a surplus of goods to distribute, but they have a limited capacity to map out where that's really needed. In terms of, you know, these remote areas, you need to go on motorbike or walk part of the way, or the community has to walk 7 kilometers to, you know, pick that aid up. This is the role that the locals really play. They come in and, you know, find those gaps and fill those gaps, and that's what they're focused on, and that's what they really care about. They really care about equity. It's really important to them. They're actually part of that community. Yeah, these local NGOs, they live there, they were born there, they're from there. So, you know, if this community doesn't get help after everyone's left, they're going to get in trouble because, you know, you're a local NGO, you're supposed to be looking out for us, right? So there's that kind of like personal accountability thing. I mean, there's two sides to accountability. There's the paperwork, financial accountability, but then there's also the human accountability that, you know, people need to be treated fairly. And it's very, very hard to do that in a big disaster. But there's usually not enough to go around, so you gotta like choose your battles kind of thing. So by having someone who's actually from that area involved in that choice-making process, your chance of having it done properly is a lot higher. Actually.
Lokal NGO punya visi yang jelas untuk pemberdayaan masyarakat, punya nilai yang jelas bagaimana cara mendorong pemberdayaan masyarakat itu sesuai dengan konteks lokal, punya semangat yang bagus untuk mewujudkan cita-cita dan visi mereka. Tapi kita masih kekurangan di misalnya networking. Kita masih kurang itu soal networking, sehingga misalnya ketika ada pendekatan baru, ketika ada masalah baru misalnya, kita mungkin ya pekerjaan yang kita lakukan kurang terekspos ke dunia luar. Misalnya selama ini kita sudah lokal NGO sudah melakukan berbagai program, mulai dari kesehatan, program perempuan, ekonomi, peningkatan ekonomi masyarakat, ke lingkungan hidup dan lain sebagainya. Tapi ketika networking dengan NGO internasional atau dunia luar itu tidak terbangun, maka apa yang kita lakukan di sini menjadi tidak terdengar gitu, meskipun kita sudah melakukan banyak.